Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite. Whatever the case may be, my name is Marcus, and I am the host of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the blackbraziltoday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. So, as I often do with some of my videos, I like to uh, go over how I was introduced to a particular topic or how this particular video topic came about. And this what I'm going to discuss today actually it goes back a couple of months because a friend of mine that's still living in Brazil, he's African American as well. He sent me a link to a video some time ago. And I thought that the title of the video was pretty intriguing. I'm like, okay. And it was two black women, black Brazilian women. One was brown skin, she had braids, and the other one was on the lighter skin side with a kind of like a curly afro. And in the video they maintained that the left in Brazil had hijacked the anti-racist movement. So I was kind of curious about what they were talking about, because this is the video actually that I was talking about, the basically the sequestering of the racial agenda by the left. Okay, this is conversation with the Brasil Paralelo website or YouTube channel. It's a conversation with Patricia Silva is her name, and Gesiane Freitas. So both of these women in the video were discussing how they felt that maybe the anti-racist movement in Brazil, on the left is not being, let's say 100% truthful about the situation in Brazil. So that's where, they actually put out a book together. They co-authored a book to talk about what they thought about what's going on in the leftist movement, the black movement, the black Brazilian movement that's tied to it, the feminist movement. They take on a number of issues in the book and in the interviews that they're having at this point. I've been checking out a lot of interviews with Gesiane Freitas at this point, and it's pretty amazing, because once you come to understand that the left is the same everywhere you go, then everything that she's saying or what the duo is saying, it starts to make sense to you, because it's been a number of years now where I've been more willing to take a look at some of the ways that the left is leaving black people behind, or you could say that they're kind of how can we say, they're exploiting the black vote to stay in power, particularly what we see in the United States, but we see remnants of this going on in Brazil as well. So that's why I wanted to tackle this today, because I thought it was intriguing, some of the things that they were saying in the video, and I says, okay, I'm going to have to take this on because I'm just curious about what their thoughts are. Years ago, I wouldn't have been ready to listen to what more conservative black leaders were saying. I remember, like, it must have been 20, 25 years ago. I remember a popular black conservative named Larry Elders. He had a talk show at the time, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember what year it was on and what year. It wasn't on TV for very long. But I just didn't like Larry Elders. And it wasn't that I disagreed with what he was saying. It just seems so much. It seemed the way that he spoke, it almost seemed like he despised black people more than the racists did. But I look back now and I'm like, well, he's just very passionate about what he believes, because he sees a clear deception with black people being led around by the left, like a little, a little puppy that's being loyal to his master. Move 2 decades forward. And it's funny because I'm talking about this now as I just saw an interview with Larry Elders where he was on The Breakfast Club. And a lot of you might be familiar with The Breakfast Club, but I had to stop watching The Breakfast Club a couple of years ago because it just became so apparent to me that all of them on The Breakfast Club are basically just gatekeepers of the left and the Democratic Party. And it's just like, again, if black people can't look at both sides are not going to be right. Neither side is going to be wrong, all the time. I'm saying you're going to get some things that you can support on the left, some things that you can get from the right. And what I got from this interview that Larry Elders did with The Breakfast Club, just like, I don't know, it was a couple of days ago. And to me, he completely cooked all three of those hosts on The Breakfast Club. It was like they didn't come to the table with anything except for it's white supremacy, it's white people. What about white people? And it's like, okay, nobody's here saying, as you know, I have a blog that I've been doing since 2011, and a lot of the material on my blog is based on what goes on with racism in Brazil. And this is absolutely not to say that racism and white supremacy, or what some people like to argue, white superiority, or how Brazil has framed the thoughts, the ideology of white superiority. It's not to say that this does not exist in Brazil anymore, because every day you still get examples of white Brazilians treating black people clearly with racist gestures, racist words, racist reactions. It's clear. But the problem that we have to discuss these days is that we have to be able to look at everything. As when we're looking about the situation with black people, why are black people seen to be on the bottom of societies in so many in multiracial societies? Why does that seem to be the case in whatever country we go to? We can't just continue to just point and say it's racism and white supremacy until we have reached a point where we've put in all the effort that we can to get to where we think we're supposed to be. There's a lot of examples I could give of this. You know, we have problems in the black community. We have a problem with, you know, our families being broken up. We have a problem with just the attitude that a lot of us take. You know, how we seem to gravitate to sides that and support things that aren't necessarily in our best interest. You know, this is a lot of this is coming out as of late, just how we carry ourselves, the type of culture that we seem to want to support, even though it's clearly detrimental to our survival and just our everyday existence, right? I'm seeing these same effects going down in Brazil. And when you have people on the right, they're always going to be dismissed as being racist. And if they're black on the right side, then people are going to look at them as, you know, quote unquote, the COON word, or they're going to look at them as sellouts. And it's like, is that always the case? Ever since I was still in Sao Paulo at the time when I became aware of this woman, Candace Owens. A lot of people hate Candace Owens, but my question has always been, are you honestly going to tell me, I don't agree with everything Candace Owens says, but can you honestly say that she's wrong about everything she says? Is that actually true? Or do you just not like to face the reality of the things that she's pointing out? So what I notice here with these two women, Gesiane Freitas and Patricia Silva, I was wondering why I had never heard of them until my friend he still lives in Bahia, sent me a link to one of their interviews. I says, why have I never heard of these women before? And what it is that for most of the time that I've done this blog, I've read, you know, and I've quoted and translated mostly material just from the left. And these two women in their interview, they says, you know, we're ostracized, you know, from the left in Brazil, the Movimento Negro, you know, the black movement in Brazil. It says, if you don't follow the talking points of the left in Brazil, then they totally ignore you, which is what I have found. You're not going to find conservative blacks getting any play in the mainstream media in Brazil. Okay. And this is the same thing that I see with how black people see things in the United States. If it's a conservative black, you don't want to hear anything that person has to say, but it's always the same question I'm going to ask. What if they're actually right? We can't just dismiss what people think without listening and coming to a conclusion. You listen to one side, listen to the other side, and you come to your own conclusion about which side makes more sense. You know, when I said years ago that the Black Lives Matter movement was another setup, it was another deception, people didn't want to believe that. Now, I know because somebody recently wrote this in a comment, and I don't disagree that when you talk about local chapters of the Black Lives Matter movement, there were some good people working, putting in work. But on the national level, can we all agree that Black Lives Matter was a scam and it remains so at this point? So then you have Black Lives Matter, you know, trying to internationalize this movement, where you saw Black Lives Matter movement actually coming down to Brazil and meeting with some of the Black Brazilian activists there. So my thing is, we have to be able to take an honest look at both sides, because if you put all your chips into one sack, what if that side that you're invested in just, you know, what if you lose everything? You've invested so much in that side without considering what the other side is saying. And now it becomes blatantly apparent that this side deceived you and, you know, just exploited you. Now, what do you have? So in talking about this topic, this friend of mine who made me aware of these two Brazilian women, you know, I come to find out that they had put out a book, and he sent me this book in the mail a couple of days ago, and it just got here. So page book is less than 100 pages, but I just wanted to check it out. If you translate the title of this book, is basically it's the title says what they won't tell you, or what they're not telling you about the anti-racist movement. So this is what's going on in Brazil. So this is the perspective of two women who are more on the conservative side. And as I said, I just want to get to the truth. I don't care who says it. If it makes sense and it's true, regardless of the messenger, what's real is what's real. And that's just how I see it. So let me get into an interview that one of these two women did. I think it was at the end of 2022. And she said that the feminist movement is racist. And that's not nothing that's, it's unusual, because Black American women have said that for years. And I've seen this being said by Black Brazilian feminist activists themselves. Like the feminist movement is dominated by white women, and they don't particularly care for the race issue. Okay. This expert criticizes the movement's ideas and defends a broad debate on the racial issue by the Brazilian right wing. Okay. Now, mind you, there have been a number of Black conservatives that have come out of Brazil. I don't support all of them. There was one in particular who I was just like, man, where did they find this guy from? There are some Black activists on the conservative side who seem to be more anti-Black than the races that Black people have complained about. I forget his name. It's Sergio Camargo. He was the head of this very important governmental institution that promoted Black history and Black culture and the Black cultural contribution to the history of Brazil. And he took over this. He was appointed by President Bolsonaro of the extreme right. And this, man, some of the things that would come out of this guy's mouth was just totally unbelievable. And this is what I'm saying. This is the discomfort that I have with Black conservatives when they go to that far, where they're just like insulting Black people worse than the racist who Black people say are racist. I don't get that vibe from all of them. I remember some years ago, this guy named Fernando Holliday came out, and people were talking about him like, oh, he's a sellout. There's another woman who's made a name for herself. I think her name is Livia Zaruti. And most Black Brazilian media totally ignores her, even though she has a pretty huge following, I think, on YouTube. I think she started, I can't remember where she started, but I just remember reading some of her material. And I'm saying, I don't agree with everything that she says, but you can't dismiss everything that she says. You have somebody like Paulo Cruz, who is he has a PhD. I don't get that same vibe from him. Also, he's just willing to look at the whole situation and come to his own perspective. What's his view on the situation with Black people? All right. So again, you have to be able to look at both sides. This is an article I'm going to want to cover very soon, and it's talking about the Black right, where the conservatives get the racial question wrong. All right. Where they err. This is an article that's talking about those Black conservatives who I just mentioned. Paulo Cruz, Fernando Holliday. You've got some of the names in here. Fernando Holliday is right here. You've got Sergio Camargo right here, and you've got Paulo Cruz here. This is an article I'm going to want to take a look at in the future because, like I said, I'm willing to look at the conservative side because, again, they can't be wrong about everything. The other thing I want to mention before I even get into today's article is that we have to be able to look at every aspect of society and come to a conclusion about why Black people continue to be in a certain in the situation that we're in. Okay. So some of these articles talk about this. This is from 2013. This is from my blog, Black Brazil Today. And the well-known historian, I think her name is Ana Flávia Magalhães, she asked the question, can Black women exist within a feminist movement dominated by white women? So you got the same issue going on in Brazil. In this particular article, okay, this goes into what I'm talking about. We have to look at everything. True, racism clearly still exists, right? But the question would be, with Black people attaining more opportunities, moving up in society, over the last 20 years, more and more Black Brazilians have been able to get into the university because of the quota system. right? This article says I was the only one in my graduating class. 20 years after Brazilian universities began affirmative action, college is still a lonely experience for Black students. So this is what I'm saying. The more we get into, more of us attain, higher education, more of us enter into the middle class. So the question is, how do we get more Black people into the universities? And that's not just that's actually not the most important issue. Of course it is to get into the university, and it's the first step. But then another thing that I've found is that I found kind of like the same situation going on in Brazil is that Black people, we tend to focus our studies on the social sciences rather than the exact sciences, okay? This article from 2013, in Brazil's medical school programs, Blacks are only 2.7% of students. They represent 4.5% of graduates in the 10 prestigious majors, okay? Let me see what this one is. Matter of fact, there's another article I wanted to get into. When we talk about what they call the wage gap between men and women, this article, I just put this up last November, the wage gap between men and women in Brazil. Does it make sense to say that the capitalist puts machismo above profit? And this article is basically just going into, okay, can we just say that women earn less money than men simply because they're women, or is there something else going on here? And similar to what other studies have shown from the United States, in Brazil, we see the same situation. Well, what are women majoring in? What are the differences between how men work, where they work, what their interests are, the type of fields that they tend to dominate, and what is it that women are studying? What area are women working in that makes up for this gap in salaries? There was a video I did some months ago that was talking about two of the top soccer players coming out of Brazil. For the women is Marta, who I think she just recently retired from the Brazil's national team, and at the time Neymar. And it was like something like, why does Neymar earn like 100 times more than Marta does? And the point was that it's not because he's a man and she's a woman. It's because there's more money coming into men's soccer than it is women's soccer. So obviously, if the men are bringing in 10 billion reais and the women are bringing in, say, 500,000 or 500 million reais, who's gonna have more possibility to cut up the pie so that the players get paid more? This is the same discussion that we've had in the United States. So is it really sexism, or is there something else going on here? This article right here, segregation in education, Blacks make up less than 10% of students in the top 20 private schools in Brazil. So access to the top schools. So what does that tell us about the differences in salary in Brazil between Black people and white people? What is the difference there? Do we find something else? If we were to have an equal distribution of white and non-white students in the universities, how fast would it be before we started seeing a leveling up of the salaries between Black and white Brazilians? Now, this article, it goes into what I'm talking about, and this is something I'm going to have to cover soon on the video on the YouTube channel, because this is what I was just talking about a minute ago. It's talking about the majors of what Black and white students in Brazil study. So this was very intriguing to me. If you look at this I have to find the article that I found this from, but it shows a proportion of Blacks to whites by the university courses that they're taking. Okay, so in architecture and urbanism and odontologia, when you look at these two areas, like on the top here, you have medicine and you have people who go into being veterinarians. In these areas, there's one Black person for every 16 whites. In these two areas here, you have one Black person for each 12 white people. You go into other courses, finances, banks, and insurance. One Black person for every 10 white people. Engineering, one Black person for every 9 whites. Agronomy, one Black person for every 8 whites. We look at engineering and agronomy, and these are going to be high income areas, and Black people are very few who are studying these areas. But then you get into the social sciences, philosophy, history, letters, and you see that inequality diminishes. You got one Black person for every 4 whites. In social sciences in general, you get one Black person for every 3 whites. So this is the whole point. Political science, And pedagogy, you've got one Black person for every 5 white people. So this is in the Brazilian university setting. So this is what the point is that I'm just making. It's like we have to be able to analyze all of the points here and come to a rational conclusion as to why Black people are lagging behind. We're not throwing out the idea that racism still exists, but what happens when Black people start to, for example, enter into fields that offer higher salaries? The computer sciences, could be cyber security or something like that, finance, banking, engineering, medical, medicine, we'll say, the law firms. What are the numbers on Black people there? And then we find that as we continue to stay in the social sciences, while other groups, particularly Asians, whites, Indians, and other types of people, they go into these high salary positions. And then we're stuck in the social sciences. So there's one of the explanations of why there's a difference. You can't just say, well, university students, white people earn $80,000 a year versus Black people who earn 45 or 50. That doesn't tell the whole story. If you have to look into, okay, what did this person study? Okay, this person studied sociology. This person entered into engineering. Obviously, there's going to be a salary difference there. So this is the reason why I think a video like this is necessary. We can't continue to just say it's only racism that's holding Black people back. So that's why I like to listen, what does the other side have to say? So let me get into this article for today. Again, this is an interview with Patricia Silva. So let's get into this. The feminist movement is racist. Expert criticizes the movement's ideas and defends a broad debate on the racial issue by the Brazilian right wing. Okay. This is Patricia Silva. She's 36. Patricia Silva was an activist in the feminist movement for less than 1 year. She says, I abandoned it when I realized that it is not suitable for Black women, she said in an interview with Revista OSG. A postdoctoral student in sociology, Patricia, they say Patricia, we say Patricia, decided to study the group in depth and found that the movement is racist. Okay, another picture of Patricia. Let's keep this going. To publicize her findings after reading a series of books, Patricia created the Instagram page known as Preta de Rodinhas. Preta meaning Black woman. I'm assuming Preta de Rodinhas, maybe she's talking about roundtable discussions because Rodinha, Holda, that's what we'll say when, like a Holda, that can be a conversation, a roundtable discussion. Maybe that's what that means. She also has the course A Mulher, Raça e Classe, meaning woman, race, and class, in which he addresses racial and political aspects of feminism, in addition to exposing what women who don't belong to the movement think. In this interview, Patricia recalled her militant past, discussed the problems of feminism, and guided the right to address the issue of racism. Below are a few main excerpts from her interview. So first question says, how did you become interested in feminism? She responds, my feminist phase lasted less than a year between 2016 and 2017. I became disinterested in activism when I realized that the movement is not suitable for Black women. I realized in activism that there was only one profile that feminism understood as a woman. I thought, I'm a poor Black woman. This is not for me. Some people have pointed this out. They find that the feminist movement is of mostly middle-class women. Continuing, in addition, some of the militant speeches differ from what I believe. So I started to read more about the subject from the perspective of the exclusion of Black women from feminism. I discovered that my problem with feminism went beyond the issue of Black women and involved epistemological, sociological, and philosophical issues. I concluded that feminism has nothing to do with me or other women. Second question, what is the biggest problem with feminism? She says, the harm it does to men. More and more people are having this criticism of the feminist movement. This is something that I've been listening to for over a year in terms of the feminist movement in the United States. So I've always asked, when I did a report some months ago that said that Black men and women tend to be more supportive of feminism than the rest of the country, then I have to say, I have to look and see, okay, well, what has happened in the United States after the feminist movement? What is the situation? Because if you can look at what happened in the United States, as things are often adapted in Brazil from the United States, is it possible that the same thing is going to happen in Brazil? The future will tell us. some of the more militant Black men that I've known in Brazil have already started discussing, and this has been going on for some years. They've already critiqued the feminist movement, right? That's something I'm going to explore more as I record more videos on this topic. So the biggest problem with feminism, she says, the harm it does to men. Our generation is the most weakened and emasculated. Even in public policies, feminism manages to be influential, forcing the government to direct guidelines for women. This was very important throughout history, but today it is not necessary. For example, public education policies have programs focused on women. Currently, women account for almost 55% of those in higher education. Men are behind them, but the state continues to invest in mechanisms for only one side of the coin. Feminism creates a lobby in the state structure that to ignore male problems, which are many. Men are the ones who die the most that drop out of school, among other problems. And this is something I've heard about this for many years coming out of the criticism of feminism in the United States. But when you look at Brazil, you see almost the exact same thing. Men are the ones more likely to die in dangerous professions. Men are more likely to take their lives. It's just a whole laundry list of things that people tend to ignore about what's going on in the lives of men. Same thing is happening in Brazil, as I just said. 3, is there a thing such as Black feminism, or what they call feminismo negro in Brazil? Patricia responds, yes, it is a strand developed in the second wave of feminism between 1960 and 1970. Black women observed that their demands were not being met by feminism. The movement was only concerned with sexism and ignored racism. Thus, a strand called Black feminism was born. In that context, there was sexism in the Black movement and racism in the feminism movement. Currently, I don't understand why this Black feminism is necessary, since there are several Black intellectuals who could form any other movement or any movement other than Black feminism. There is an epistemology called African womanism, developed by U.S. professor Clenora Hudson, who understands that Black feminism is a contradiction. In African womanism, the family and the man are not opponents of the family, unlike feminism that sees in the man the original sin. When analyzing the whole situation of racism and feminism, it makes more sense for Black women to approach this African womanism. Professor Djamila Ribeiro, the main leader of Black feminism in Brazil, has said several times that she was the victim of racism in the feminist movement. In history, feminism has supported a eugenist policy in several countries such as India, Costa Rica, Mexico, and the United States. There is a profile of women designed for feminism, and it is a white middle-class woman. 4th question, you say you take a Black approach to feminism. Why? Patricia responds, I don't talk about my opinion, but about what happened. In history, we have the activist Margaret Sanger, many of you know about her, who supported birth control in the U.S. and became the founder of the first abortion clinic in the country. Dozens of Latina and Black women were forcibly sterilized with the endorsement of feminism. This is not an opinion, it is in history. Also in the first wave of feminism, we have the women's suffrage supporters who unleashed all the racist slurs when Black men won the right to vote. The great suffrage supporters like Elizabeth Stanton and Lucretia Mott would not admit that Black men got the right to vote before them. To them, it was an affront to civilization. Men only got the vote because they went to war. The suffrage supporters of the first wave didn't want the vote for everyone, but only for them. 5th question, how can the Brazilian right deal with the race issue? Patricia responds, first, it has to recognize that racism exists. The left has appropriated the racial agenda because the right never wanted to sit down to discuss the issue. There is only one side of the spectrum taking over in the worst possible way. Even Blacks on the left say that the left is not anti-racist. The Black activist, this is the Afro-Brazilian philosopher Sueli Carneiro. In the 1980s, she had already visited PT rallies to talk about this. Now, the PT, the Partido dos Trabalhadores, or the Workers' Party, is basically the leftist political wing in Brazil. Well, there are several parties of the left, but the PT is one of the most popular. The current president, who's in his 3rd term, President Lula da Silva, he's part of the Workers' Party. And for years, Black Brazilians have complained about how the PT is supposed to represent the aspirations of Black people as Black people support the left, but you don't find many Afro-Brazilians in leadership roles within the PT. So it's kind of funny because a lot of the same complaints that you find from Black Brazilians about the Workers' Party in Brazil is some of the same complaints that Black Americans are having about the Democratic Party. She continues, and even with all this, the left is the only one that still gives some signal on the race issue. However, British and American conservatism doesn't treat racism as me, or just whining. Only in Brazil is it like that. If the left treats this issue with schizophrenia, the right also has a part or plays a part for ignoring racism. The left hijacked the racial issue because the right never wanted to participate in it. When the right begins to guide this debate, the left will end. Intriguing words, intriguing opinion that she has here. This is why I wanted to talk about this article, this interview with Patricia Silva. Like I said, her and her partner, her co-author of this book, Gesiane Freitas, they have a lot to say. Gesiane Freitas has recorded a number of interviews in the red pill community, the Brazilian red pill communities on YouTube. She just recorded more than a 3-hour interview on one of those channels, and it's like a lot of intriguing things she has to say. Again, I have to point out, I don't agree with everything these two women have to say. Like, I find it a little bit, some of their stances on the race issue come up a little bit short for me. That's something I'm going to talk about in a future video. So this is to say, like I said, I can't agree with everything the left says, can't agree with everything what the right says, but both of them have a little bit of it right. Some of them, a lot of them have a lot of this they have wrong. So in order to find the truth, we have to look at both sides and see, okay, when you vote for a politician, you're not going to like everything that woman or man supports. You're going to vote for that person based on the things do you think that aligns with your thought. You just have to go along for the ride when you discover the things that you disagree with about this candidate. I see that same thing going on with the left, right, liberal, conservative dynamic. I can't agree with everything on the right or can't agree with everything on the left. But, until we're able to come to a resolution about the situation of Black folks, whether it be in Brazil and the US, we have to have all hands on deck. We have to listen to both sides. Nobody has the complete answer for this issue. But I think some of the responses that we need, we're going to get there by listening a little bit to the left and a little bit to the right. That's just how I see it. So for now, I'm just curious to know what you thought about this interview with Patricia Silva. Very intriguing. Like I said, I'm looking for more conservative voices coming out of Brazil because I've listened to the left for many years. I think a lot of Black Americans are becoming disillusioned and disappointed with the left in the United States, particularly Black men. And it's going to be intriguing what's going on in Brazil because this is something that I've seen also. And I followed this with the Black Brazil Today channel when it was once called Black Women of Brazil, because I noticed that Black Brazilian women were leading most of the movements. They had most of the organizations. They were getting the funding for their NGOs. And at a certain point, I wondered, well, what's going on with the Black men? That's something else I'm going to have to tackle in the future. But for now, what did you think about this interview? Feel free to drop a comment in the comment section. Consider subscribing to this channel. Subscribe, comment on this channel, let's see, subscribe. Definitely click on the notification bell so that you can you'll be one of the people that gets my videos first when I post them up. And with that said, I'm gonna end the video here and ask you to come check out the next video.